Thank you, Richie. Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to see this packed room. We actually were kind of moderating our own emotions, saying maybe 15 people will show up. The rule of thumb is 1/3 of the people that sign up show up, actually. So we're really trying to manage our expectations. But this is just so beautiful and just heartwarming to know this community is here in Madison and that we're here as community. Thank you to Richie. The one thing I should say when Richie was talking about the miracle that brought me here, 50% of that miracle was Richie. And we're just so grateful to be able to have this dialogue with all of you and with one another. As Richie pointed out, Justin and I have known each other. We're Dharma siblings since we were teenagers. And now with Rod, the three of us have become a Dharma sibling trio. And so we really want you to feel comfortable, to know that this is a conversation all of us are having. We're just going to do a bunch of Q&As, and I've tried to incorporate a lot of the questions that came in. So many of you who registered actually submitted a question, so we've tried to put that into the program. And I think in terms of framing, the two things I just want to talk about briefly is, first of all, why did we use the term Bhumisparsha, right? Some of you might be familiar by what it means. It's a Sanskrit term, and it actually refers to that moment where Buddha became enlightened. And in that moment, he's under this tree, he becomes enlightened. He takes his entire hand, all fingers, and touches the ground, and calls the earth goddess to rise as witness of his enlightenment. And it is said both in Hinduism and Buddhism that when you practice and use this mudra, you immediately ground yourself. You ground your emotions, you center yourself, you're kind of filled with courage. You have a long-seeing vision. You're filled with clarity. So there's a reason why we thought this term makes so much sense, including why it's personal to the two of you, which we can get into. And then the other term in the title that I think we should explain is environmental justice, right? So people are often surprised when they find out that race is the #1 indicator in the US for where toxic sites are situated, nuclear plants are situated, coal is situated, where the mining is happening, all the garbage sites are. That is the #1 indicator. The US is completely segregated. And the people who bear the burden are going to be formerly and currently disadvantaged people, right? Black, indigenous people of color, people who are poor, different classes, LGBTQ, and so on. So when we talk about environmental issues, part of it has to be us understanding that there is this historical injustice that has been done. And we have to write that as part of the environmental movement. It's not enough for all of us to just recycle or do our bit. We actually have to go back and fix the injustice because it's ongoing. It's an ongoing problem, right? And then, of course, for me, being from the Himalayas and the global south, I, of course, think about how unfair it is that most of the third world countries in the global south that had nothing to do with the problem are bearing the burden. So that's another way of thinking about it. Environmental justice is this term that encapsulates how we make this justice a principle, almost like a moral, ethical thing that we're all committed to, that we think about it in terms of the legal structures, in terms of elections, voting, all of those things, and we think about it in terms of what people have access to now, what kind of capabilities they have. So it's holistic, it's large, it's a little scary, and that's why Bhumisparsha matters so much. We need the courage. We need that clarity. We need to feel empowered. We need the vision. And so this is the meaning of the title, and now I'm going to open it up to the two of you. Maybe we start by talking about Bhumisparsha, the organization, and how the two of you created it and why. Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming out, and I know there are so many things you could be doing on a Sunday afternoon. I don't know if you do brunch in this culture. If that's what your people are into, or church or whatever, but thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation. And I definitely want to thank Dekila, for inviting us, and for the center here for hosting us as well. Dekila's become a very dear sister for me. Last time we met in March, I was crying.
It was a tough meeting.
It was a tough meeting, talking about environmentalism, and I just kind of broke down. But it wasn't about the environment, it's about something personal. Not that the environment isn't personal, but like, but anyhow, back to me. And I just want to also thank the land here, this really precious land. I believe land is conscious, it's a being. I call the land, the earth, the mother, right? And the land has really been calling me really deeply for several years now, really like aggressively, calling me back into relationship, right? Into worship, into a love affair with the land, with the earth, to remember the land, to remember that to touch the earth is to touch all beings, as my Creek elder says, to touch all of our relations, right? So to touch the land, to touch all beings. And so that's really important. And to forget the land is to forget connection, and to forget family, and relationships. And that really comes back to Bhumisparsha for me, touching the earth, right? To touch the earth is to remember who I am and where I'm situated, and to tell the truth of who I am, right? Because if we keep lying to ourselves, we'll never get free, right? There's no liberation through deception, right? And we talk about climate change, we talk about the work that we have to do, but we're missing a fundamental work, which is like telling ourselves the truth. Telling ourselves and admitting that we hurt, that we come from lineages of hurt and trauma, right? And we've taken that trauma out, we've taken that hurt out on the earth, And one thing that I believe is that the earth is going to be okay. It's like we're trying to save the planet. Actually, we're trying to save ourselves, right? Because the earth just has to like scoot over and sashay a little bit. It just has to drop it like it's hot once, and then we're off the planet, right? As it's done many times before, several times before, And so just to remember that we are dependent on the earth. And so when I talk about Bhumisparsha, this is the practice I'm talking about, And the conversation, it gets real, and some of you are going to get really offended and pissed off because I'm not holding back these days. Some of you are used to it, I can't scare y'all. Yeah, so that's me in our community.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that really, I think it's indicative of both our relationship to the environment, but also relationship to Dharma practice, not Bhumisparsha, but elsewhere, is a complete disconnection from what it means to actually be human. And so for us as humans, often these days, we're so distracted. We have our phones, we have our devices, we have all these people looking at their phones. And we don't understand our mind. We don't understand what it's like to look people in the eye and feel and see and witness. And then, of course, we don't do this with the earth, right? We do whatever we want with the earth. And within the context of Buddhist practice, there seems to be sometimes so little authentic integration. It's all very heady. It's all very heady, and it's also all very often in university locations, which we happen to be in right now, which is fine, right? But Dharma is, I think, more about the heart and learning how to rest into a healthy, flowing, balanced, equanimous relationship with the entirety of the environment, which includes people. It includes the earth. It includes the air. It includes all the elements. And I think one of the things that, I love Rod, and I think the thing that both of us came to see is that there had to be some kind of disruption in some Dharma circles because of all of this separation, this disassociation, and this head over heart. The mind is great, but mind over heart is a problem. right? Mind over compassion, intellect over compassion, concept over being, right? And so touching the earth as a way of, maybe even as a declarative statement that, no, there needs to be something more. We need to do something differently. And maybe for both of us, as Dharma teachers, model something different. Which I think, the thing I love about being in relationship with you is that that's what we do. And even though we might catch flack or not necessarily be super recognized by authority structures, we are living without regret.
Wow.
And for me, it's really, honestly, Ani Zangmo, Dekila's mother, lit that fire in Sikkim in 1995.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're carrying the legacy.
Yes. It's a lineage.
It's a lineage.
Yeah.
So both of you actually have been part of very strict lineages and still are.
Mm-hmm.
Both of you are Tibetan Buddhists. Both of you are Karma Kagyu. Justin, you're right now, for example, I think the only Western student I know of Gyatso Rinpoche, Gosher Gyatso Rinpoche, and we're the student of Bokar Rinpoche, for those of you who might know this history, who used to teach in Merrick, and so on. And Lama Rod, same for you. You did the 3-year retreat, which is really strenuous. And at the same time, so you're holding these very traditional lineages and are part of it and contributing to it, but you're also sort of harbingers of American Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit, and all of us, about what your vision for American Buddhism is, and how is it different from the Tibetan Buddhist lineages you belong to?
Okay. So, I mean, for me, yeah, like I still have one foot definitely in the very traditional, rigorous Vajrayana world in this particular instance in Sikkim. So Gyatso Rinpoche is one of the heart sons, one of the 4 heart sons of the 16th Karmapa. I don't know of many other Western students. With me, really, one of the reasons, so this could be a little circuitous, but one of the things that prevented me from doing a 3-year retreat was I became a father relatively early in life, right? So I was 24 when my first son was born. And what was also interesting to me was not monastic Dharma. Like for me, like from and probably also because of Ani Zangmo, the model set by the Indian Mahasiddha tradition was always much more interesting to me. And so with respect to His Eminence Gosher Gyatso Rinpoche, he ordained me as a Repa, so like in the lineage of Milarepa, a lay Yogan practitioner. I've also been now recognized or empowered as a Nakpa in the Yutuk Nintik tradition. This is a way of disrupting a system that was important for me to disrupt in myself, because I struggled for quite a bit around becoming a monastic. And actually it was Ani Zangmo, Dekila's mother, who told me, I was like a couple hours away from having my hair cut by this wonderful Rinpoche, Padang Rinpoche, and she told me, this would be a terrible idea for you. Don't do this. And my youthful exuberance, at first I was like, okay, my teacher says no, don't do it, so I won't do it. But part of me was processing, what does this mean? What does this mean? And it really wasn't until probably a decade and a half later that I began to understand. And I think this also ties into the name Bhumisparsha, how the ground underneath our feet has to be part of our practice. And this involves authentic integration, right? So within my relationship to the Karma Kagyu lineage in particular, I have a very close, deep, heartfelt relationship to the lineage, especially in its orthodoxy. But then I don't see that as necessary or necessarily helpful for others here, because what's more important is to be able to be authentically rooted and situated in who we are here. Mm-hmm. Right? Dharma is about getting free. It's about being connected. It's about also understanding how different we are. I mean, Rod and I are very different in many ways and have had different experiences. And yet the thing that brings us together is an authentic practice of Dharma. And everybody in this room can have an authentic, powerful relationship to Dharma practice that is deeply situated and embodied within oneself, that doesn't necessarily participate in the same way as traditional heritage Buddhism that you might find in Asia. And what I have always been concerned about is splitting. You know, for a long time, I've gone to, study in Asia easily over a dozen times. And for a long time, I felt that there was a Justin that I would leave in the airport in Delhi, and then a Justin that would come home, And so whenever I was home, I was half a person. And, I'd go back to India and I'd be like, oh, now I'm a whole person. But I'd be like, what about my family, right? What about my culture? What about my interests? What about my all of the different things I feel passionately about? So it's really about integrating, but it's also about, again, I think our work is about modeling something different, and this is modeling that it is, that we are, in one way, the ground that supports us, Mother Earth, is obviously important, but in one way, each one of us, too, is that same mother, right? And we have to be able to love and nurture and recognize that this vehicle, right, this body, is pure, right, is sacred, that all of our individual family lines are pure and sacred, and an authentic place from which Dharma practice and realization, like authentic realization, can dawn. So it's a disruption, it's a reinvention, it's a recreation, but it is, and it's authentic.
Do you want to add anything?
Sure.
Yeah,
In terms of like our training and I was out of control. I'll just start with that. I was out of control in life. And then I kind of fell apart, and then the Dharma arose. But not just the Dharma, it just wasn't like strict practitioners. I was very fortunate in my early 20s to be living in community with radical Buddhists who were both socially engaged and also deeply in practice. And that was my first introduction. Like, I didn't know any other kind of Buddhist, who wasn't out on the streets, raising hell. And I was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and I knew that as a Black queer person in general, that like, for me, my credentials had to be very clear, because anti-Blackness functions to disrupt the credibility of Black folks, particularly in traditions like this, like in traditions that aren't Christian, So you find yourself in the esoteric practices, South Asian practices, and for me in Tibetan Buddhism, right, which there were no Black people. I was the first Black person to go through my 3-year retreat program. No one mentioned it except for one nun. I was like, of course I know, like I get it, like, and so I am someone who, I'm really interested in orthodox. When I'm approaching something new, I want to know how it's done and how it's been done. And so moving to a monastery and meeting Norla Rinpoche, who's my root teacher, moving into a monastic environment and going into a very strict program like this was really incredibly important for me to do. And afterwards, right, began the work of reinterpreting my training in a way that made sense for my communities, right? And I really am so deeply grateful to Norla Rinpoche. I know a lot of people aren't right now, but like I personally am, particularly because he kept reminding me of who I was. He was like, you're not Tibetan, you don't get with this monastic shit, like, why don't you just go out into the world and just do what you love to do? And he was like, you're Black. This is his exact language. This is an exact statement. He was like, you're Black. So there are people who will listen to you first before they listen to me, And I just felt like that was an authorization for me to like really embrace my identities and move out into the world and just like make it real Black, you know? And that's like, you know, my role right now in this, you know, kind of emerging space is to understand how to embody this really important ancient lineage of practice in a way that embraces everything of who I am, my cultures, my lineage, my ancestors, right? And to offer practice that I feel is really grounded in Black bodies and queer bodies, you know, as well. So that's what I'm really interested in. I was really deeply fortunate to meet, you know, Justin. We met on Facebook, you know, years ago, you know, and we just connected, and I was just like, oh, there's someone like me who's like trying to do something different. So we would like, you know, just like do it, and just like over time, we were just like, you know, let's just like do what we need to do, right? You know, I'm very sensitive to the intense anti-Blackness that drives all systems of violence, you know, in this world, including anti-Blackness in Tibetan tradition and Tibetan culture as well. I don't necessarily find that I feel as if I have a place in the tradition or the lineage, but I hold the lineage, right? And I'm authorized to create spaces for people like me to have access to this practice. And that's what lineage is for me. And that's what the continuation of the authorization that my root teacher offered me. That's how I continue to honor the lineage, is by making Dharma accessible. And that's all I'm supposed to do as a teacher. Not to get in the way, but to open the way.
Incredible. Thank you. It's heavy. So one of the questions that came in from somebody here was, can American Buddhism create effective social change, and how? Can it be a vehicle for social change?
Yeah. I mean, you know, short answer, yes. I mean, long answer is, though, like, it requires people, like, if you want to create social change, one needs to do the work, right? And the work starts here, right? Like, you know, we live in the cut and paste world where, you know, cut and paste and put everything. That doesn't work. That will never change anything. You know, that won't change ourselves, right? Wearing, you know, just changing one's clothes, for example, to, you know, clothes of any kind of religious tradition doesn't change your heart. Right? It doesn't change how you relate to others. So I think it definitely can, but it requires people to show up and embrace discomfort, embrace oneself, embrace one's own contradictions, open up. I mean, you know, again, like I'm very interested in like non-conceptual meditation practices like Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And in these, right, the kind of key thing is resting into open, non-judgmental, harmonious relationship to everything. And, you know, I'm a white male, cisgender white male, and so I can speak as an authority perhaps on being white. That's not easy for white people, right? It is not easy, and it's sometimes not even easy to hear that, right? And so it can, if people are willing to get uncomfortable. It's not going to, you know, there's a Tibetan medicinal pill, the precious pill, right? Or multiple kinds of them. There's no precious pill that just does the work for you. You know, one needs to do the work for themselves, and to do the work for themselves before trying to do it, you know, with and for others.
Yeah, that's important to echo Justin. You know, I think, you know, there's a decentering that has to happen, and I think we're still in the process of creating American Buddhism. I think we're just in the experimental phase right now, and I love that. So I think it's just kind of wide open for us to start dreaming and creating and doing the organizing to do that. But whiteness has to be discentered, it has to be disrupted. And I think that before justice really takes root within this emerging American Buddhism, it has to be grounded within communities of struggle, communities that understand change, right? And it can't continue to rest within convert communities of privilege. There's no liberation through privilege and comfort, only through risk, discomfort, right? And so I think that's part of what I'm trying to do too, on my end too, is really work with different communities, marginalized communities within Dharma here in this country to understand how do we create space for us to really embody this practice. But when I say embody, to bring our whole selves into it, because I think one of the things that many of us are used to is leaving so much of ourselves at the door of the Dharma halls. We talked about in Radical Dharma quite a bit. You can't get into the door until you forget a part of yourself. And what I think we have to do is to remember, and some of us have to remember that we come from lineages of violence that must be reconciled. And this is why ancestor practice is really important for me to reestablish in American practice, because you have to start actually acknowledging that we're energetically connected to something that has to be addressed and cared for. Even, it's violence, trauma, it doesn't matter what part of privilege or disprivilege we show up as a person coming who, descended from enslaved people primarily. More recently descended, but of course farther out, African descent people. But, someone descended from African people, I've had to do a lot of work to disrupt transhistorical trauma, to release, like my body, from the impact of racial trauma. And I think we all have to do that work. You just can't forget. You can't be ahistorical or just like this one anomaly that arises outside of a context. We're all arising within context, and the context must be addressed if we're going to see the change we want to see. And so our Dharma practice moving forward has to be a justice-based Dharma practice, right? It can't be a country club Dharma. It's like, how do you center discomfort and say, yeah, here it is, right? I'm not in a Dharma hall in the meditation session trying to get blissed out. I'm trying to actually be in a relationship to something really uncomfortable, but it's not just uncomfortable, it's full of data that's teaching us how to get free. If we can just allow our hearts to break, if we can let go of how we're so fixated to the sense of identity, which is illusionary to begin with. I don't mind identity. I love identity. I think about identity a bit, but I can embrace identity and still actually practice liberation. But it means that you have to turn back into identity instead of running away from it. And stop perpetuating this kind of helplessness, which is just a really sophisticated way that keeps us from doing liberation work. I can't do this, it's too much. I don't care. I don't care. Being black is hard. I don't care. Go tell someone else. Don't complain to me. Do work. As my teacher was like, do something. Go do something. He would just piss me off so much. These old school Tibetans, I need it was just why aren't you practicing? Because I'm eating. Well, you should be practicing. Go practice. You could die anytime. Why aren't you working? And I just really had to take that on. It's this is the most precious thing that we could be doing, is trying to get free and help others get free. And I just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
I remember one time I was complaining to Lama Norla Rinpoche, who was Rod's teacher, root teacher, and he just looked at me and said, "I'm so bored." And I was like, in the middle of this 5-minute thing about how difficult my life is, and in Tibetan, he was like, "Oh, ngap to charso." It was like, it's such a good teaching, you know?
You would be like falling apart, and he would be like, "Get over it."
Yeah.
Why are you crying?
Yeah.
What's
This
what's
is the tough
meaning?
love in Tibetan Buddhism.
He would say, "What meaning?
Yeah.
What meaning?
Yeah.
No use."
Yeah. So, for me personally, one of the greatest, dreams I had for American Buddhism is that, the work I was doing with the World Wildlife Fund, I would travel in Africa and Latin America and see all these peace and conflict resolution processes that were existing, really difficult, Victims are the perpetrators, right? Perpetrators are also victims. And these dialogues that were happening that were really rich and important in communities, full of pain, everything, the heartbreak is right there, but people are also healing. And I remember I'd come back to the US and be like, where's our peace and conflict resolution work? Like, where is that reconciliation? How are we having this dialogue that this country is founded in so much violence and pain, right? Where do we have this dialogue? And I think listening to the two of you, I feel like, yeah, maybe American Buddhism is that vehicle. And then it's so easy to just look at who is up here with the mics and think they will lead it. But I think the amazing thing about Buddhism is each one of us is supposed to be the Buddha, right? Each one of us has that capacity to be a Buddha. And reawakening that, as the two of you are, that each one of us gets to lead that work, I think is maybe just the most powerful piece, that we can walk away with. Anyway, okay, I got distracted. So going back to environmental justice, I think one of the questions is why should the climate crisis, the environmental crisis matter to Buddhists, right? But then why should it matter to American Buddhism? And if it does, what are the ramifications? What changes for us if it does? And I mean this like institutionally, not so much individually, because I think so many of us are environmentalists.
I would just say, it's about compassion. Actually, it's about caring for people and how people are living and how people are. And I think the caretaking we do for the environment is how we take care of everyone. All beings, all creatures. I know it's easy for us to skip into the ultimate, the absolute view, and to say, well, it's just a dream, which it is, right? But that doesn't get you anywhere, right? It's just a thought. You just said something really interesting. It's like, oh, everything's empty. Okay, great, but you're in the body, in the relative. What are you going to do with what's happening right now? What are you doing in the relationships? But to address that, right, to address the environment within Tibetan Buddhism means that we have to start actually taking on language of trauma as well, these lenses that begin to describe our disassociation as people who are, racialized and identified in ways that have been difficult for us to embody, right? And so I believe, in my practice that we can't touch the earth until we're embodied, until we're able to actually fully occupy our bodies in a way that's fluid and spacious and liberating, right? And that way we can have a direct relationship with the earth. And I think the practices and ideas are really rooted in the lineage, like it's there, But again, it's like privilege will disrupt that. Like privilege becomes a lens that begins to censor out things, right? We get these traditions, that's super police and censored. Like I don't want to name any traditions like Insight, but it's but that's not fair because it's all of us. But yeah, we're afraid of taking responsibility for the totality of samsara. Which for me is a carceral state, in spiritual abolition, which I'm introducing in my next book coming out in October. It's a spiritual abolition book, which is like my attempt, right, to bring these, these ideas into a Dharma framework, that's really important for me. But yeah, caring, like we have to care about each other, and the earth at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think of all of the prayers that exist, where we're praying for all beings, and it's so, I mean, no offense to World Wildlife Fund, but like, it's like pandas and tigers, that's great, right? But Dekila, like you brought up, like, what about environmental injustice for people of color, and around BIPOC communities and globally? And you can't sit and recite these prayers, may all beings achieve liberation, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and then not be directly involved. And like Rod, you pointed out, responsibility, like to have the responsibility to be not only part of the change, because it's not joining a club, it's about embodying what awakening is. Like I will, like anytime anybody forms the intention, may I be able to be present to help all beings achieve liberation. That's not in the head. It's all beings, it's all bodies, it's all histories. It has to be. I think this is a little bit of like a linchpin moment for what happens with American Buddhism. I think the big problem with Buddhism in the United States, at least now, is that it is so disembodied. And part of the embodiment has to be connecting to the earth, but then it's also connecting to other people, and then it's connecting to beings that are not just people, ghosts, right? Demons, ancestors, right? So like the healing goes back in time, and the healing goes forward into the future, all through what we are doing when we're embodied in the moment right now. And if we are going to lack that level of sensitivity, then it's just a thought experiment.
Yeah. It's just as an experiment you just kind of get off on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
like a dissertation.
You can.
I mean, no offense, but that's what it becomes.
Wow, that's intense.
People are feeling it in this room right now.
Yeah, I just think also too, it's like there are important issues you bring up around colonialism too. It's like we haven't done enough decolonizing, right, of ourselves. Decolonization of the self,
absolutely,
as well. And I know that like this sounds really overwhelming, to people. You come into this work and it's like, I can't do all of this. Well, you're not supposed to do everything. The problem is not enough of us. If everyone did something, this would be a different world.
Exactly.
But instead, there's a handful of people really moving and driving liberation, struggles.
And there's like a Buddhist publishing industrial complex that helps propagate this.
Yes.
I mean, it's true. Like, what we know. I mean, I say this all the time. Even in terms of classical Buddhist texts, what we know as classical Buddhist texts are only what we see being sold, translated, sold, and propagated by publishing companies. When you look at this, at least with Vajrayana Dharma to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it's something like 5% of the entire canon has been translated into English, right? And then we say, oh, well, I'm an expert.
Yeah. And that just keeps getting retranslated.
New editions, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, how many translations of basic goodness do we need?
Yes.
I think we got it the first time around.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's some really good remixes, but like,
exactly.
Like a company wanted me to write a book on mindfulness. I was like, we don't need a fucking book on mindfulness. Like, my God, we need people to practice something. Like reading isn't practicing.
Exactly.
Like intellectualizing isn't practice,
yes.
and practice is embodiment, right? It's touching the earth, it's wrestling, is struggling, is change, is transformation, not just reading something and becoming an expert, then using your expertise to like further colonize me.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
as a practitioner, you know, well, you don't know all the names of anything, but you know what? I can hold my anger without strangling you right now.
You are embodying compassion.
I think this is a great accomplishment right now.
Yes.
You know, I may not know, you know, all the lineages, and you know, my Tibetan may be crap,
Right.
you know, but like, you know, I'm my hands aren't around your neck, so
Yes.
I appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
That's the success for today. That's good. There's so many questions. We're not going to obviously get to it all. We're going to do one last question and then open it up to everybody and online. So bear with us. And I have to now pick one question. I think the question I'm going to settle with is eco-anxiety and climate distress. Everybody is experiencing a certain amount of distress, certain amount of emotional and mental trauma, whether it's they're thinking about the species that are being lost. Thank you, WWF.
No, totally.
Whether it's about just the kinship relationships Native folks have with the land, with all living beings, seeing that as an extension of your family, right? Whether it is those of us who are watching the wildfires, struggling to breathe, struggling with our everyday. If you're in the global south, this has been the reality for decades, right? Whatever it is, we're all carrying a certain amount of trauma. And so I think my question is, how do we stave off despair given the immensity of suffering around us? And then the immensity of suffering we tend to carry as well, right? Many of us carry.
I mean, I'll start off by kind of echoing something that Rod says quite often. I'm going to steal your ideas. But this is deeply resonant for me as well. So for, like on my end of things, practicing with a broken heart, you know, and so there's this, right? Like, I think I've got young kids, right, who are 8 and 10, and on a weekly basis, I find some kind of reason to be very concerned about their future, their existence. And even, you know, like Dekila, you were saying last night about how theoretically in 20 years there will be no more stars to see because of all the light pollution, right? And so there is this element as a parent that I am deeply concerned about. Like ultimately though, for me, like it comes down to practicing with a broken heart and being able to live and work in that space and learning how to be able to find love for myself and love for others as a place, as a garden, so to speak, to develop more compassion, to be able to be there for everyone else. Like, at the rate everything is going, right, we are not going to have a habitable earth, right? And it will begin in the global south. And it will eventually come into more privileged, you know, nation states, et cetera, cultures, and there will be a tremendous amount of international political chaos, violence, death. And this is something that we need to be able to begin to understand and prepare ourselves for. One of the things that helps me is going to dark places, not in my mind, but in the world. You know, I've done work for New York City Department of Correction and New York City's Potter's Field and all of this. So being around the depths of human suffering and developing capacity and skill and wisdom and a set of open eyes to that. Because my personal feeling about the environmental crisis is that it's not going to be a sunny outcome. You know, which is it sucks for the, I know. But the point is, but I know. But the point is, my point is, you know, I mean, this aligns very well with the Buddhist tradition in the sense that we are all going to die, right? And
Sorry.
nobody,
This is a personal joke.
I know. Nobody likes that, right? And yet we keep trying and coming back around. And I think that what we need to do is bend better to support one another.
Yeah.
There is not going to be a magic bullet, right? Or a magic peace sign. There's not, you know, and so we need to be very pragmatic. And the wonderful thing about, you know, the Buddhist tradition is that it is very pragmatic. You know, and so it is, but I do think we need to take a new page and be more active in addressing what we can address while we can address it. It's almost as if the problem becomes worse the more we create these very kind of cloistered Dharma communities that are the country club kind of communities that might bring a lot of traditional Dharma resources into small spaces. But what we need to do is spread this out. And I think, Dekila, to your point before about this is not about just Rod and I or a handful of other people. It's like we need a Dharma wildfire to be lit in the hearts of people. And so that's what I think the answer is. So practice, obviously, but not just isolating ourselves in our practice, showing up for one another, being real, confronting our own fears, getting uncomfortable, looking at how much less we can live with, all of these things, you know, and just being with one another as everything continues to unravel. I mean, that is a very beautiful thing. I once got into an argument with somebody after 9/11 where they were like, what happens if another 9/11 happens? Would you leave or would you stay? And I'm the staying type. Like, I will stay in the fire with people. And I think we need to be able to model and show that staying in the fire is okay. And not only is it okay, it's noble. And it's not noble in the, like, you know, high and mighty kind of way. It's a noble in the way that the Buddha demonstrated, and so many other people, Ahizamo, like so many people. And I think this, you know, getting out of fairy tale Buddhism, I think is ultimately a really, really helpful thing.
Thank you.
I mean, I would just, you know, add to that and just say that, like, you know, I come from a community that struggled for many years, right? I come from enslaved people, you know, and every day was the apocalypse, you know? And what ancestor practice has continually taught me that, like we make a way out of no way. You know, that's Black liberation theology, Black liberation, or Black prophetic tradition. Is that, like, if the door is closed, we're just gonna, like, punch a hole in the wall, you know? Like, we're gonna create, you know? We're gonna, like, get fluid. We're gonna dream differently, right? And we're gonna redefine the world, you know? And so I take that deep confidence and situate myself in the world, feeling like my ancestors at my back, and saying, you know, and so this helps me to actually be in the world and feel really full of, like, optimism. I feel the future is full of potential, you know, as well. Things will change, absolutely, but I'm used to change, right? I'm used to struggle. I'm not afraid of that anymore. That's made me a little severe, you know, over the years. Like, I'm going through a really severe phase right now, and so I just kind of get tired of people's bullshit, and so I just, you know, let's cut the small talk and let's just, like, get to it. You know, I don't like you, you don't like me. But, like, we have to, what my ancestors teach me too is that, like, we have to move into the heartbreak. We have to move into the fear, move into the darkness. Right? You have to consume the chaos instead of the chaos consuming you. And that takes audacity, that takes courage, that takes letting go of wanting people to like you. You know, like, you have to be willing to be alone and feel loneliness in this work. As an activist, it feels very lonely. You know, when you're just out there, you're the one who's just like, y'all need to pay attention, we need to do something, and how people just ignore you at best, at worst, you know? Like you become a recipient of violence, but that violence is the way that people are just weaponizing their own intense fear and pain. Like you become a mirror. You know, I think activists are prophets, right? Prophets tell you about, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's up in the world. You know, and prophets get stoned to death traditionally in theology, Christianity, you know, many of us are familiar with that because people can't stand to bear that mirroring, you know, when you're just trying to escape and to distract yourself because you don't have the capacity to hold the intense fear, the ambiguity, the anxiety, you know, but there's no other way around this, you know, to journey into it. And we have the resources. Right? You know, if we think about practice, we think about lineage, like there have been countless people like who've done the work of actually achieving enlightenment, you know. I'm thinking, let's say countless, I mean like the whole span of like, you know, human, like just like life, you know, not just on this planet, but the whole universe. I mean, there are many beings, right, through some way, through this practice have attained enlightenment, but that enlightenment has not come through avoidance. It's come by moving straight ahead, and it's going to scare the shit out of you, absolutely. And then this when you call in all of your benefactors, you call in the teachers and the gurus, and you call in your ancestors of the earth, right? All the beings who love you, right? There are so many beings, so many unseen beings here in this world, you know, who have come here because we're in crisis right now. Like, and that's also why I feel very optimistic, because I can sense into this overwhelming support and help, you know. And one of those, group of people are just like this young generation of people. You know, even the babies, like it's just like the babies that I know and these kids that I know, they seem to be here for a reason. They're like, you know, they have a purpose, you know, they're not just like, they're just like really moving through things really quickly, you know, because they understand what's at stake, you know. I mean, if you choose to be here, you're coming here to work, not to party.
Exactly.
You know, those days are gone. But just to say this, I mean, this is what I want to say. That was a little severe, but like, yes, I'm working on it. This is important too. There also has to be joy in this as well, too. You can't really do the work fully unless you're choosing joy, because joy is a resource that offers us the space to be in relationship to the hard things. You know, and that's what my ancestors teach me too, is, you know, that you have to choose joy as part of our liberation strategy, as well as facing and looking into a really difficult future.
You know, one of the elders we work with up north from the Menominee tribe, Elder Gary Besaw, actually was speaking to us right in the beginning of COVID. And there was just so much panic in the air. You remember what that was like the first 6 months. And he just said, you know, look how generous and compassionate Mother Earth is. She sent us COVID so the younger generations know how to handle the climate crisis. They are going to be prepared in a way that we cannot. And it's just stayed with me so much, because the wisdom of that, but also that joy is a choice. You know, it's really a perspective. You can shift 2 steps to the left and the perspective changes for us, right? And how Buddhism, again, is that vehicle for us, for so many of us with practices. You know, we can use that to shift twice, just move a little bit. Sashay was the word you used. Sashay to the left, sashay to the right, and find that perspective, right? Where we sort of make that choice to embrace joy. Because the moment we do, what we're doing is creating joy for others. And this is a movement. This is a movement that needs joy, because we are heartbroken, and we are authentically heartbroken. We're going to have to find authentic joy for it. You know? Okay. we're going to open it up for questions. So if people have questions, raise your hand. And then, I don't know if have there been questions coming in? Okay, all right. Conversation time.
How to address that?
I'm not really interested in Republicans anymore. Like, I really, like, it's just like, you know, this is what abolition is. It's like, you have to disrupt these systems that we're relying on to save us. They're not saving us. How do we create?
How? You know, we have to educate people.
Well, you know, when you're...
Like we just had the 4th of July,
Yeah.
right? Land of the free, except if you're black, right? They don't talk about this.
I mean, my community talks about it. Like, it's... like, I don't...
We don't hear it.
Yeah.
In the news.
Yeah, in the mainstream
There
media.
should be a moment.
Yeah, there should be a moment, and a lot of people are doing a lot of work, right, to disrupt that. But like, I think for me, it's just like, I think there are certain things that won't change until a real crisis happens. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think COVID was a real crisis necessarily. I'm talking about when people started going hungry. You know, this is, you know, as in revolutionary histories, when people go hungry, you know, that's when people get active, right? And I don't think we've gotten there yet. Mm-hmm. When capitalism starts to like decline even more and people don't have access to resources that they've been relying on, then you start getting really anxious and you start thinking, who's to blame for this, right? And it's really violent. That kind of reactivity to deep discomfort is really violent, but it changes things. You know, and again, it's like so many people who haven't actually felt discomfort yet, right? Like when that starts to happen, and it will, then you'll see a shift in narratives, right? But
How to connect that to Buddhism?
oh yeah,
Because you know, practicing is nice, but it doesn't rake the fields or pick up the vegetables to eat. You know? It doesn't do. You know, it doesn't make you eat.
Maybe this is a good time to bring up the questions. So a lot of questions came in actually about capitalism and Buddhism. Maybe this is a good time to bring that up. How do we disrupt how Buddhism has been mainstreamed in so many ways, where it's so capitalistic, when we're really talking about capitalism having failed all of us, right? Having failed the poor, having failed, you know, vulnerable communities. So I think that is a nice segue.
Yeah, I mean, we need to divest ourselves from capitalism in the Buddhist tradition. I mean, in America, I mean, when I don't know how much that, I'm sorry, that mindfulness training was quite expensive. Like things like this, right? Where you know, the fee to get into the space, right, keeps most people out, right? There's that. There is, what do we need to practice? What material items does one really need to practice? Right? Nothing, right? Just yourself, right? And yet we have an entire, again, you know, Buddhist, American Buddhist industrial complex, and people wearing the clothes and buying the books and consuming more. I mean, people are more engorged in Buddhism than you would find even in traditional cultures. You know, like within Tibetan culture, right? Prior to in the 1950s, the illiteracy rate was something around 80 to 90%, right? What we have here, though, especially, and it's interesting during COVID. One of the beautiful things about COVID was that it increased the number of things available online. But one of the things I noticed was that people consuming vast quantities of Dharma, so much so that I was once teaching something online, and somebody was like, "Well, they emailed me. I've been doing this and this and this and this and this, and I've accumulated all of this stuff." And I was like, "Well, that's great. Why are you coming to my thing?" You have more experience, or at least more exposure to Dharma than I have had, right? Why are you still doing this, right? So we need, I mean, you know, the interesting thing is like it's easy to project the blame elsewhere, but much like to Dekila's point, like this has to dawn in the hearts of all people. We need to begin to divest ourselves from all of the excess that comes our way. You know, what was the name of that campaign that happened during World War II to save metals, grow gardens? I can't remember the name of this, but we need to simplify, reduce what we consume, right? We need to, we need to look at that. And I mean, Republicans are not the problem because centrist Democrats are not that different. You know, I mean, it's like the system, I agree 100% with Rod. Like, I mean, the entirety of the system is the problem, and capitalism is the problem. But it doesn't start, it starts with each one of us. Like, truly, truly. You don't need anything to practice Dharma other than what you have right here. Right?
And I would add too, I mean, we're not talking about it publicly necessarily.
Which one? Oh, that's...
I'll just say, you know, I'm not talking about this necessarily publicly yet, but like I'm a part of like I'm teaming with, you know, a group of people, and we're acquiring land, and we're working with indigenous communities to return back to land and to learn how to live on the land, to grow food and so forth, and to create, you know, I don't want to get too much into it yet, but like just to create a new structure of living and being together and practicing Dharma together that's really simple, that's not capitalist based, where people have access to resources without needing, you know, anything to get into it, you know, but that takes, of course, using the resources that are present in the system, like money, right? So it's repurposing, it's rechanneling energy. You know, it's like in an indigenous framework, money is energy, you know, so resources become energy that you're directing. And that takes a lot of fixation off of money. Like, and money as a mind is just something that has energy that needs to flow, that needs to not accumulate and settle and be used as a way to like reinforce my identity as being special, but it's something that should be used to help, to reduce harm, to get more simple. But I think going back to the land has become really important for me. Living communally has been important for me recently, and just learning how to let go of all the distractions and to model that. And this is happening all over the world. Like, this is like a huge thing that people are getting interested in.
And I think to Rod's point also earlier about the younger generations kind of being able to step up. I mean, what we're seeing now is, for example, like a college education doesn't get you nearly as far, like, you know, 4 years of undergrad doesn't get you nearly as far as it did 20 years ago. This is going to decrease, right? And this is going to increase people saying, you know what, this system's just not going to work, right? So I do think that we are in this transitional moment where we are moving from a lot of the kind of artificial excesses that we've seen, especially, you know, post World War II, during the boomer era of look at all the opportunity, look at all of this, and all of the resources, you know, across the board are dwindling. And this is going to cause people, I think, to necessarily have to think differently and model things differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really I'm aware of being at the university and working with young kids is how their expectation of how life is going to unfold is so different than mine. I'm close to 50 now. And, you know, I still always thought I'll have a house. I always thought I'll have a career that paid me enough, that I would survive and have a retirement plan. And it's just not there for young people. And I think we who are 50 and older really have to understand that the world they're living in is just completely different than ours. And if we're not in this trying to, let's say, reform capitalism and the system that is failing these young generations, we're not supporting them in the way they need us to. Right? Because it is hard. It is really hard. I don't want to give up my 401k. You know, it's really, really tough. But then it's like, how am I showing up for the next generation and the generations to come? And so we have to find ways where we're not internalizing that fear. We're dreaming with them a different, more fair world. And I think the one thing for me, I mean, so the Loka Initiative, which Richie and I co-founded and run, we work with evangelical church leaders, you know, and it was really important to me that I reach out and find allies in conservative movements. Because that dream that I have and the vision I have for the next generation cannot just be for Democrats and Buddhists and our type, the touchy-feely, happy. It cannot, it has to work for everybody, right? And so finding allies who are also equally concerned about what's happening to the next generation and building on common values is really important. So I think not even in our vision, not restricting ourselves to certain groups. Okay, there were lots of hands in the back.
We got a couple online.
Oh, okay. Do we do one online and then go to the back?
We did one in
Sounds
here.
good.
Let's do it. All right. Can you define samsara as something man-made? How do you reconcile that which is inflicted, the carceral state, with that which is self-inflicted, like climate change?
You read the question again?
Yeah. Can you define samsara as something man-made? How do you reconcile that which is inflicted, like the carceral state, with that which is self-inflicted, climate change?
I mean, it's our struggle to be in relationship with our pain that gives rise to a reactivity that creates violence, including violence against the earth in the form of climate change. I mean, it's rooted within ourselves. Like, I'm only doing, I'm only reacting to what I'm experiencing in the moment, right? And reacting, not responding. Reacting, and we're living in, this has been a part of like human civilization for a while, but like, I don't know of any, well, I'll just reframe that because it's a little more complicated, but like, just to simply say that like, untended to pain creates pain for others, if we start tending to the pain, doing deep emotional labor, which I think is the activism that's called for, really deep emotional labor, release, and transformation of trauma and pain, then that actually takes away the pressure that we're all wrapped up in trying to manipulate the world around our trauma, which is a manipulation to keep ourselves really comfortable and safe, while trauma and pain is just like raging, so the more intense the trauma gets, the more we try to manipulate the world around us, including the material world, like the land, the earth, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the question.
I think that's the answer.
That's the answer.
That was a really deep question.
Yeah. No.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, hands in the back. Oh, so many. The person, yes.
So I didn't know why I was coming today. My mother brought me, and I've been in love with the idea of Buddhism for years, but I didn't want to get up and talk because I've been, I don't know why I'm even like this. I'm so not an emotional person. But I share space. I'm a social justice system disruptor for 20 years in this town, and I have to work with progressively white people so I don't want to share my personal space because with that, and seeing you here today to see that I might be able to share space, and maybe that's why I'm here. Because, and then something you said, because how I survived with doing my work for so long is I'm head over heart. You already burn out in my work. I do it because of justice, not because of lovey-dovey feelings, because it's the right thing to do all of the time. And I would love more information because I am, for some reason, here, and don't know why. Well, I kind of do now, but I need to be with my people. I have just unpacked a whole bunch of stuff as a biracial person, and having a white mother who I absolutely love, and being a Black woman, what that means. And so I would love some information on what you're doing or anything local, and I guess I know I'm here. And I just want to say thank you for sharing so much about culture and power and privilege and all of those things and what you're talking, because they landed somewhere for me. And so I appreciate you.
But that's the healing that we have to go through as, you know, activists, change makers, organizers like you. This is why this is the same thing that started like disrupting me in my 20s, like when I was a full-time activist, you know, living in community. And I just got to the point where I was like, this is too much. Like, I feel like we have these people that we're struggling against, who are creating violence for us. And then I go into my affinity group, like about other activists, and there's another fight. You know, it's like the same things are being mirrored within the group. And then when I started bringing up care, like, why don't we care for ourselves? Like, why is this so hard? Why are we getting burned out like we are? Then I would just be told to be quiet and just be like, this is about the work, like we're working here, you know? And I was like, well, what about love? And then I was really kicked out then. My God, like I couldn't even believe I was talking about love because I began to change. And I was like, I'm tired of doing shit because I'm pissed off. Like, it's just hurting me, you know, and it's making me a difficult person to be around, right? And like, how can I actually start organizing from love, empathy, and care, and at the same time centering what I need in order to be in the world doing this work, you know? And that's what began my path to this point, you know?
Yeah, I think that's where I've seen myself for a while.
Yeah.
In that space of wanting to feel it.
Yeah.
And then, but then where? You know, where do you do it?
I mean, it's
So
so much.
online, talk about Bhumisparsha online.
Yes, we have lots of online programs, you know, with Bhumisparsha, our community. You're surrounded by Bhumisparsha people kind of around it. And heart-based practices, like I work, you know, with a lot of activists. You know, there's so many Black activists doing healing work now, somatic healing work, trauma-based healing work. I'm part of like plant medicine work as well, like Black liberation and plant medicine is where I'm at as well. And we're just finding all of these ways of like calling in these resources to actually promote our healing, because that's the thing. Like, we need to heal instead of constantly being drawn into trying to educate and change. Like, how can we create the boundaries to start focusing on ourselves? Because I can't do the work if I'm not actually experiencing some level of healing. You
Yeah,
know?
see, I've just done it by myself.
Yeah, you
I
need-
do a lot of the healing work, and I do healing work with my Black community, but when it comes to me, I
Yes.
do it by myself.
Who's-
I don't have a space.
Who's taking care of you?
Me.
No, that's the issue. Like, you need community of people who are centering healing and who are also doing this work that you're doing. And those communities are out there. You know, like, I'll give you some names later, like Princess Hempful, like, is one person.
Someone right in front of me who said something else too.
Oh yeah, Eric knows all these people too. Yeah, you know, and just like, and my work, like, which is really accessible online. Love and Rage is a great book for healing, you know, and activism, you know, as well.
We have an online event that's completely free, August 8th to 10th, called Resilience in the Anthropocene. Rod is speaking in it.
Oh.
Prentice is speaking
Yeah,
in it.
Prentice,
So I'll send the information to you, Mom.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question? Yeah. Someone else? Anyone else have a question? And I think I'm going to ask Lama Rod to close by doing a heart practice, maybe for all of us. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's what we go into.
Okay.
Maybe I think the time it's a good time for us to do that.
Yeah, all these professional meditators, look at you. My God.
Everyone went into position.
Some of you are new to me because you don't know that, like, I react to getting ready to meditate. Like, I'm like, oh my God, it's a sea of shifting bodies. Let me sit up straight. Just like start where you're at. Start where you're at. Like, choose comfort for the body, not, let your body be at ease. Whatever ease means for you, let your body be there. You can even ask your body what it needs right now. If you need to lie down on the floor, do that. If you need to stand up, do that. If you need to pace, do that. And when you're ready, shifting your attention to the seat and just noticing the weight of your body and the seat rising to hold you. And noticing that sensation, that anchor of your body meeting the seat. And allowing your attention to gently rest, just right on or within that sensation. And in this moment, we can connect to the profound way that we're being cared for by the seat. As the seat holds us, as the floor holds us. If we can surrender to that holding, if we can trust that holding, maybe in a way that we don't trust anything else to hold us, but to trust the seat and the floor, the ground to hold us, surrendering to the care of being held. And in this moment, we can also invite into our practice all the beings, both seen and unseen, who are always trying to care for us, who are always trying to show up for us. You don't have to know who they are, but just say welcome. Welcome to all the beings who love me, who want me to be well, who want me to be safe and free. And just feeling the presence of these beings awakening in you and around you. And letting these beings really see you. Because they are seeing you. You can't hide out. But let them see and hold all the discomfort, the fear, the anxiety, the brokenheartedness. And even in this holding, maybe we begin to experience space itself. The spaciousness that's holding everything, including ourselves. That the space is boundless, without limits, wide open. And the world and our experience becomes less constricted, It becomes more open, more fluid, more spacious. And as we begin to transition out of this space, we begin to wish and even need all beings to experience being held, being supported, that all beings may actually remember space itself is trying to take care of us. And in this experience, may all beings experience the deepest well-being, happiness, and joy. May all beings experience safety, access to all the resources they need to be well. May all beings be free. And may we, in this moment, recommit ourselves to the great work of liberation for all beings, including ourselves. And as we begin to transition out of the practice, I invite you to shift your attention back to the seat, connecting to the seat, the weight of your body, connecting to the elements of the earth holding all of us. And remembering the earth, we slowly begin to reawaken our bodies through simple movement and deep breath, coming back into this space, into this timeline. All right. I know there's no bell or anything. I know many of you are trained. So I just want to thank, I never use a bell in my practice, by the way. Mostly because I just start making tunes out of it and it distracts people. Anyway, thank you for your practice.
Lovely. I cried my eyes out. So people can stay a little bit longer if they just want to chat with Lama Rod and Justin, and we're here. People want access, resources, people who wanted resources. You can also come talk to us. Thank you so much for coming. We're so grateful. Peggy wasn't here for her thank you, so I'm just really going to say we're so thankful to Peggy for all her support, making this happen, and bringing Tergar along in this journey with us at Loka and CHM. Thank you, everyone.